The water came at night like a living wall, ripping through the subdivision and tearing up asphalt like wet paper. Within minutes, it collapsed fences, crushed mailboxes, and turned cars into twisted metal. But at old Wyatt's place, the water flowed calmly through winding channels nobody understood, moving around his foundation like it had a map. The secret was in those strange ditches everyone laughed at. The secret was in the phrase his grandfather used to repeat, "You don't fight water, you guide it." Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and leave a comment saying what city you're watching from. I want to know how far this video is reaching. Oak Ridge sat on the eastern edge of Austin, where the hill country starts to flatten out. 42 homes, a gas station, and Maria's taco stand. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where people bought their first homes and stayed until retirement. Life followed the Texas rhythm. Spring was planting season, summer was drought, fall was harvest, winter was preparation, and every few years, usually in May, the rains would come. But they always passed. The drainage ditches always handled it. Water found its way to the creek, then to the Colorado River. That's how it had been for 30 years. 3 years ago, the county paved the subdivision roads, nice, smooth asphalt to replace the old gravel. They said it was progress, that it would raise property values. They also upgraded the storm drains, wider pipes, concrete culverts. The county engineer said they could handle a 100-year flood. Wyatt had lived there since before it was Oak Ridge, back when it was just ranch land, 68 years old, born and raised in dry farming. He remembered the flood of '81, when Shoal Creek jumped its banks and water came through chest high. He remembered how his grandfather built on high ground, how he counted steps from the creek bed, how he studied which way the wind pushed the rain. The house had stood for 50 years, survived everything. It was in January, 4 months before storm season, when Wyatt started digging. Didn't tell anyone. Just showed up on a Monday morning with a shovel, pickaxe, and wheelbarrow marking the ground with spray paint. The markings were weird. They weren't straight. They snaked across his property like a drunk rattlesnake, making curves that made no sense. Some ditches led toward the foundation, others toward the driveway, others to the back of the lot. None followed the obvious path. For 3 weeks he dug. Alone, silent, methodical. Ditches 2 feet deep, some wider, others narrow as a gutter. In each one he laid gravel, then sand, then lined it with perforated fabric. On top he placed river rocks and thin metal grating. It looked like art, not engineering. At the back of the property, where the land sloped toward the old creek bed, he dug a deeper swale, 3 feet deep, nearly 12 feet long. There he built something like water stairs with large stones creating small steps. He finished by connecting everything to a side outlet that nobody understood the purpose of. There was no drawn plan, no construction permit, no explanation. Wyatt worked from sunup to sundown, stopped for water, went back to digging. When he finished, his yard looked like a crazy Zen garden, full of trenches and stones, channels leading nowhere. The neighbors started slow. First the looks, then the whispers, then the open mockery. "Wyatt building a moat or something?" called out Dave from the gas station, getting laughs all around. "Probably gonna raise catfish, sell 'em at the farmer's market," someone added. Linda Chen, who lived next door, complained that the ditches were an eyesore. "Looks terrible, Wyatt, like a construction graveyard. You need to fill those in." But worst was when the county engineer showed up. Short guy, yellow hard hat and clipboard, came to inspect the new pavement. His name was Brandon, fresh out of A&M, full of certifications. He stopped in front of Wyatt's property and laughed out loud. "Mr. Wyatt, with all due respect, this doesn't meet any building codes. You're wasting your effort. We completely redesigned the drainage system for this subdivision. New culverts, 16-inch pipes, everything up to code. Those little ditches of yours won't make any difference." Wyatt wiped the sweat off his forehead, looked at the engineer and calmly replied, "Maybe you're right, son, but I trust what I see more than what people tell me." Brandon shook his head, wrote something down and drove off. That evening at the gas station he told the story over a beer. "Old man's lost it. Thinks he knows better than an engineer. Those ditches are just going to breed mosquitoes." The phrase spread, became a joke. "Wyatt and his magic ditches," they said. Some drove by his property just to laugh. Others took pictures and posted them in the Oak Ridge Facebook group. Wyatt didn't respond, didn't explain himself. Just kept watering the ditches every day, testing the flow with a garden hose, adjusting rocks here and there. One afternoon, old Pete found Wyatt sitting on his porch, watching a ditch. He was one of the few who didn't laugh. "Wyatt, no offense, but nobody understands this engineering of yours." The old farmer lit a cigarette, took a deep drag and replied, looking at the horizon, "Pete, water's like a stubborn mule. You can't tell it where to go. You offer it an easier path and it chooses on its own." He pointed toward the creek. "See that bend? The county put the culvert down there on the straight. But water doesn't flow straight. It flows where gravity tells it, where there's a gap, where there's weakness. And I know where it wants to go." Pete scratched his head. "And these crooked ditches. Crooked to someone looking from above. But to water, it's a path that doesn't fight it. Each curve slows the speed. Each step calms the rush. When it reaches the main outlet, it's gentle. Doesn't come down like a runaway truck." He paused. "My grandfather built irrigation systems his whole life. Used to say an engineer draws pretty pictures, but the man who knows the land is the one holding the shovel." Wyatt's grandfather, old Vernon, had been a master of dry farming during the Dust Bowl, worked all over West Texas, where rain was scarce and every drop had to count. Died when Wyatt was 19, but before that taught him everything he knew. Vernon had an old leather journal, brown and worn, where he documented water behavior. It wasn't science, it was raw observation. "Water that runs straight tears up soil. Water that curves loses anger," was written on a yellowed page. "Never fight the path it wants to take. Just offer a better one." Wyatt kept the journal in a drawer. Sometimes he'd take it out to read. There were drawings of channels, diagrams of drainage, calculations done by hand. No university formulas, but decades of observed rain survived floods. When they built the new drainage system, Wyatt asked to see the plans. They refused, said it was technical, confidential, but he watched them install it, saw that the pipes were too straight, that the openings were too small, that the angle forced the water into a 90-degree turn. "I'm gonna clog on the first big storm," he muttered to himself, and started digging. April was hotter than usual. Temperature hit the high 90s every day. The ground cracked like old leather. The creek bed was dust. Wyatt noticed, but nobody else paid attention. The birds disappeared. The cicadas stopped singing. One afternoon he saw armadillos moving to higher ground. "Big rain's coming," he said quietly. On May 12th, the temperature dropped 20 degrees in 2 hours. The wind shifted direction. The smell of wet earth started rising even though it hadn't rained. Wyatt reinforced the grating in the ditches, cleared the rocks, checked the outlets. Maria posted in the neighborhood group, "Looks like we're finally getting some rain." But nobody worried. It was normal Texas spring. Happened every year. At the gas station, Brandon the engineer was drinking a beer. Someone mentioned the weather turning. He laughed. "Let it come. The system can handle it. It's designed for a 100-year storm." Wyatt walked past the gas station, heard the comment, said nothing. Went home and closed his gate. The night of May 13th, the sky opened up, not gradually, violently. In 20 minutes, 5 inches of rain fell. The kind of Texas cloudburst that turns dry creek beds into raging rivers in minutes. At first, nobody was alarmed. Heavy rain was normal. People closed windows, brought in patio furniture, went to bed. "It always passes," they said. But by 3 a.m., Oak Ridge had turned into a river. The water came down the slope with force, carrying debris, branches, trash. The county's new culverts couldn't handle the volume. The concrete mouths swallowed half, spit the other half back out. The water found paths across the surface. Pete woke up to the sound, opened his window and saw the flood. Grabbed his phone, called Brandon. "Man, the drains aren't handling it." Brandon, half asleep, answered irritated, "Impossible. The system was properly calculated. Must be temporary blockage, it'll clear." 30 minutes later, water was already over the curbs. Pete called again. Brandon hung up. In the neighborhood group, messages started flying. "Y'all, this rain is serious. My garage is flooding. Water's rising fast." But the standard response was always the same. "Calm down, it always passes. It'll stop soon. Overreacting." At 4:15 a.m., the sky had a color nobody had ever seen. Green-grey, low, heavy. The rain didn't let up. It intensified. And then came the sound. It wasn't normal thunder. It was a crack, sharp and brutal, that made the houses shake. The lights flickered and died. Total darkness. And in the silence that followed, everyone heard it. The roar. It was water, building up behind the failed drainage, finding every crack, pushing with incredible force. This wasn't just rain anymore. This was a flash flood. Debris the size of cars moved like toys, spinning, crashing, destroying everything in its path. It sounded like a freight train coming down the hill. Wyatt lit a flashlight and looked out the window. He already knew. His grandfather's phrase echoed in his head. When the earth moans, no drain can hold it. Half a mile uphill, a retention pond overflowed. Thousands of gallons cascaded down at once, carrying fence posts, garbage cans, parts of someone's shed. The mass hit the subdivision and came down like an avalanche. Linda Chen's scream woke the entire street. "Water! The water's coming!" In seconds, flashlights came on in houses. People ran to windows. What they saw was a nightmare. The street had become a raging brown torrent, violent, ripping up everything in its path. The first fence to go was the Johnsons', 3 houses up. The sound was like an explosion. Wood flew, water invaded the yard, took the doghouse, the grill, everything. Dave from the gas station watched his own fence shaking. No, no, no. The posts started cracking. He grabbed his wife and kids, ran out the front door into knee-deep water. Brandon, the engineer, woke up when his phone rang. It was the county supervisor. "The drainage system on Oak Ridge failed. You need to get there now." He dressed in a rush, ran out into the rain. When he got there, what he saw paralyzed him. The main culvert had blown out, a 3-foot-wide crack in the concrete. Water was gushing through it like a broken dam. The asphalt around it was disintegrating, opening a massive hole, and the water, having nowhere to go, spread sideways, looking for every gap, every weakness. It found fences, knocked them down. Maria yelled from her truck, "Wyatt's place, head to Wyatt's!" A group started running uphill, fighting the current. Some fell, others helped them up. Pete was carrying an elderly woman on his back. Everyone was running to the only place that had a chance, Wyatt's property. While destruction moved downhill, Wyatt's property was an island of order in chaos. Water rushed down the street, reached the entrance to his lot, and like magic split apart. The crooked ditches everyone laughed at now showed their purpose. The main flow was captured by the widest swale, followed the gentle curve, lost speed on the rocks, was distributed by the smaller channels. It was like watching a conductor leading an orchestra. Each channel had a function. The front ditch captured the initial volume. The side ones distributed the excess. The back swale, with its stone steps, worked like stairs, reducing force. The water arrived at the end gently, flowed through the side outlet straight to the empty field, never touching the foundation. Meanwhile, in the houses around, destruction was total. Fences fell one after another. The county's new asphalt was ripped up in chunks. Cars flipped on their sides, were pushed downstream. Gates twisted, windows shattered. Pete's fence, 20 feet to the left, collapsed with a crash. 4 tons of wood turned to splinters. Water rushed into his house, took the refrigerator, couch, TV, everything in seconds. But Wyatt's fence stood firm. Didn't shake, didn't crack. Water didn't even reach it with force. It came tired, dispersed, controlled by the crooked ditches. It was 6 a.m. The rain started to ease. The destruction was done. When the water dropped enough for people to come out, nobody spoke. Just the sound of dripping gutters, water running off, wind carrying wet leaves. Pete stood in the middle of what was left of his house, water to his ankles, furniture scattered. He didn't cry, just stared, mute, trying to understand the speed of loss. Linda Chen sat on the curb, clutching a plastic bag with the only things she'd managed to save, documents, a wedding photo, her grandmother's ring. Her hands were shaking. Dave stared at his gas station destroyed, pumps knocked over, windows broken, shelves collapsed. 40 years of work, gone. Brandon knelt in front of the hole where the culvert should be. The concrete structure had deep cracks. The pipes were clogged with mud and debris. He ran his hand over his face, mixing rain with tears, and didn't know if he was crying for the neighborhood or his own arrogance. Wyatt came out of his house slowly, stepping on the wet stones of the ditches. He looked around, counted mentally, 11 fences down, 18 houses flooded, 6 cars destroyed, 60 feet of pavement ripped up. He took a deep breath, didn't feel triumph, felt weight. When the sun came up, the difference was brutal. The street looked like a war zone, craters in the asphalt, fences reduced to rubble, power lines down, debris everywhere. The county emergency management put up yellow tape blocking entire sections. Damage was estimated at $15 million. Wyatt's property was untouched, fence strong, not a crack. Yard organized with the ditches working as they were designed. Not even mud had gotten inside. The house was dry, clean, livable. The difference needed no explanation. It was there, visible to the naked eye. The ridiculed solution had worked exactly as promised. The backward method had beaten modern engineering. Official numbers came later. The storm dropped 2 inches in 3 hours. The county system was designed for 4 inches in 6 hours. The math was wrong from the start. But Wyatt didn't need numbers. He only needed what he'd always known. You don't fight water, you guide it. 3 days after the flood, Brandon came back. This time without the hard hat, without the clipboard, without the pride. He knocked on Wyatt's gate late afternoon. "Mr. Wyatt, you got a minute?" Wyatt was watering plants, fixing a grate that had shifted. "I do, son. Come on in." Brandon came in, looked at the ditches, the rocks, the water steps. He stood in silence for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different, smaller. I messed up. Bad. I should have listened. Should have seen that you knew what you were doing." Wyatt didn't answer right away. Offered a chair, poured some iced tea, sat down next to him. "Son, you didn't mess up by calculating. You messed up thinking calculations are everything. There are things books don't teach, things only the land shows to those who pay attention." Brandon lowered his head. "How did you know the system would fail?" "Because I saw where they put it, saw the angle, saw the size of the openings, and because I've known this land for 68 years. I know how water behaves when it really rains. Didn't need a formula, needed memory." There was a pause. Brandon stirred his tea. Could you teach me?" Wyatt smiled for the first time. "I can, but it's not something you learn in one afternoon. And you gotta get your hands dirty." News of what happened at Oak Ridge spread. First in the county, then the region, then the state. Local TV did a story. Papers published before and after photos. But what really changed was in the community. 2 weeks after the flood, Pete knocked on Wyatt's gate with a notepad and pen. "Wyatt, teach me how to make these ditches. I'm rebuilding my fence, but I want to do it right." The next Saturday, Maria brought her nephew, a young landscaper. "He's building houses in the new development. He needs to learn this." Gradually, Wyatt started teaching. Didn't charge anything. Took people to his yard, showed each ditch, explained why each curve, each rock, each step, showed his grandfather's journal, let them flip through it, read it. Brandon came back 4 times. The last time he brought the whole county engineering team. They measured, photographed, took notes, asked permission to incorporate Wyatt's system into the new drainage plan for the area. "Go ahead and use it," Wyatt said. "Knowledge that stays locked up doesn't do anybody any good." 6 months later, 20 houses in Oak Ridge had similar swales. They weren't exact copies. Each property required adaptation, but they followed the same principle. Don't fight the water, guide it. When the next big storm came, in September, the difference was visible. Water still came down hard, the rebuilt system still worked at capacity, but now it had help. Dozens of swales distributed the volume, reduced speed, relieved pressure. Not a single fence fell. Wyatt's method became legacy. It wasn't just in one old man's memory anymore. It was multiplied, spread, alive. Above the door of the rebuilt gas station, there was now a small wooden sign. Dave had it made and hung there so nobody would forget. It read in simple letters, "You don't fight water, you learn from it." Below, in smaller print, Vernon Wyatt, Dust Bowl Farmer. Every time storm clouds gathered, someone stopped to read it. And remembered. The phrase wasn't just about water, it was about listening. It was about respecting knowledge that comes from the land, not just from textbooks. It was about humility. It was about understanding that wisdom doesn't need a degree, it needs practice. It needs observation. It needs time. And every time a newcomer arrived in Oak Ridge wanting to build, the old-timers said the same thing. Go talk to Wyatt. He'll teach you the right way. Because the right way wasn't the prettiest on paper. It was the one that worked when the storm hit.